I was sitting out on the back porch last Tuesday, watching my youngest grandson play in the yard. He is at that age where gravity is just a suggestion, running full speed without looking where his feet are landing. Sure enough, he tripped over an exposed tree root and scraped his knee on the paving stones. There were tears, of course. Eleanor brought out the bandages, we cleaned it up, and within 10 minutes he was running again as if nothing had happened. 2 days later, when he came over for Sunday dinner, I looked at his knee. The scrape was already a faded pink memory. The skin had knit itself back together with a speed that almost looked like magic. That same afternoon, I rolled up my sleeve to wash my hands in the kitchen sink, and I looked at a dark purple bruise on my own forearm. I had bumped into the edge of a door frame nearly 3 weeks prior. The bruise was still there, stubborn and ugly, taking its sweet time to fade. I stood there at the sink, looking at my arm, and then looking out the window at my grandson. It was a quiet, undeniable display of what aging actually means. For most of my life, I thought of healing as a given. I thought the body simply fixed itself, and if it was taking too long or if something hurt, the solution was always found in a small plastic bottle in the medicine cabinet. My father, a quiet, hard-working man from Ohio, practically lived on over-the-counter pain relievers in his later years. He worked through back pain, joint pain, and muscle tears, swallowing pills from a little tin he kept in his pocket. He thought he was fixing the problem. I grew up believing the exact same thing. I carried that belief into my 50s and 60s. If my knee swelled up, I took a pill. If my back ached after yard work, I took a pill. I thought I was supporting my body. I thought I was helping it heal. I am 77 years old now, and I can tell you that I was completely, fundamentally wrong about what healing actually is. The realization did not come to me gently. It came during a deeply difficult season when my wife, Eleanor, faced a severe health crisis. I have mentioned this before, and I keep the specific details private out of respect for her, but I will tell you that spending days in hospital rooms changes the way you look at the medical system. I watched doctors prescribe medication after medication. I saw the incredible value of modern emergency medicine, but I also saw its glaring limitation. I realized that most of the pills we take, especially as we get older, are not designed to heal the tissue. They are designed to silence the alarm. They lower the inflammation temporarily, or they block the pain signal to the brain, but they do not rebuild the broken fibers. When you are sitting in a sterile room, realizing how fragile the person you love is, you stop accepting surface-level answers. You start asking what is actually happening underneath the surface. After we got through the worst of that period, I could not return to my old way of thinking. I had spent my entire professional life in publishing and educational communication. My job was to take complicated information and make it understandable. I decided I needed to apply that exact same skill to my own biology. I cleared off the desk in my study, the one facing the window, and I started reading. I brought home medical journals, books on cellular regeneration, and research papers on the aging process. I sat in my worn leather chair with a pencil, underlining paragraphs, trying to understand why my 77-year-old body could not heal a bruise in 3 weeks when my grandson could heal a torn layer of skin in 2 days. What I found in those stacks of paper changed my entire relationship with my own body. It led me to a biological reality that I had never fully grasped before. I learned that true healing, the actual physical rebuilding of tissue, bone, and skin, relies on a very specific internal mechanism. It relies on something called adult stem cells. Now, when most people hear the phrase stem cells, they think of controversial medical procedures or expensive clinics overseas. I am not talking about any of that. I am talking about the repair crew that already lives inside your own body, primarily inside your bone marrow. I traced my pencil over a paragraph that explained how this works. When you are young, your bone marrow is like a fully staffed firehouse. The moment there is an injury, an alarm goes off. Chemical signals are sent through the blood, and the bone marrow releases millions of these stem cells. They travel to the site of the injury, and they have the miraculous ability to transform into whatever type of cell is needed. If you cut your skin, they become skin cells. If you damage a muscle, they become muscle cells. They are the actual builders of the body. They are the reason my grandson's knee healed in 48 hours. But then I read what happens to this system after the age of 65. I sat in my chair and read the numbers, and they felt like a heavy weight settling on my chest. As we age, our stem cells do not necessarily disappear, but they become sluggish. They become dormant. The environment inside the bone marrow becomes sticky, and the stem cells have a much harder time detaching and entering the bloodstream. The alarm still goes off when we get hurt, but the doors of the firehouse are jammed. The repair crew never arrives, or they arrive in such small numbers that the repair takes months instead of days. That is why my bruise was still purple after 3 weeks. My body was calling for help, and my bone marrow was barely answering. This realization brought me to a profound, quiet panic. I realized that every time I took a pill to mask an ache or a pain, I was ignoring the root problem. I was turning off the fire alarm while the house was still quietly burning. I needed to know if there was a way to unjam the doors. I needed to know how to wake up my own dormant stem cells without spending tens of thousands of dollars on clinical treatments that I could not afford. Before I tell you exactly what I found and the specific daily habits I built to wake up my own healing response, I want to take a brief pause. If you have been sitting here with me listening to these stories, and you feel that these conversations are helping you look at your health differently, I would ask you to take a second to see if you are subscribed to the channel. My son Daniel always tells me to keep these things brief, so I will just say that many of you who watch every week have not clicked that button. It is a small gesture, but it tells me that we are building something meaningful here together. When I continued my reading, looking for a way to mobilize these sleeping repair cells, I assumed I would find a list of complicated pharmaceutical drugs. Instead, I found myself reading studies from botanical research institutes and nutritional science journals. What I discovered completely shifted my perspective on what medicine actually is. I learned that there are specific compounds in nature, phytochemicals found in very specific plants and herbs, that have been shown to directly stimulate the bone marrow to release stem cells. They act like a chemical key that unlocks the sticky environment in the marrow. The first one I found completely surprised me. It was green tea. Now, I have always been a black tea drinker. I like the dark, bitter taste of it first thing in the morning. I always thought green tea was just a lighter, weaker alternative. But I read a paper detailing how a specific compound in green tea called EGCG actively promotes the proliferation and release of stem cells. It helps protect them from dying off quickly once they are in the bloodstream. I was reading studies showing how regular exposure to this compound could significantly increase the number of circulating repair cells in older adults. I immediately went to the store and bought a box of green tea bags. I went home, boiled water, poured it over the bag, and added a splash of milk. Exactly the way I had always made my black tea. But as I kept reading the following week, I realized I was making a massive mistake. A mistake that almost entirely destroyed the benefit of the herb. I learned that boiling water actually degrades the delicate EGCG compound. It burns it before you even drink it. And the proteins in cow's milk bind directly to the antioxidants in the tea, rendering them useless to the body. I was drinking hot, flavored water with absolutely no healing power. I had to change my habit. I stopped using boiling water. Now I heat the water until it is just steaming, just before the boil, and I pour it over loose green tea leaves. I let it steep for exactly 3 minutes. No milk, no sugar, just the pure, unadulterated plant. It was an adjustment to my morning routine, but when I sit in my chair now and drink that cup, I picture what is happening inside my bones. I picture the unlocking of those doors. The second discovery I made was sitting right in Eleanor's spice cabinet. Turmeric. For years, my daughter Rebecca, who is a nutritionist, had been telling me to eat more turmeric for my joints. I usually nodded and ignored her, thinking it was just another passing health fad. But when I looked at the actual cellular research, I felt a deep sense of regret for not listening sooner. I read that curcumin, the active compound in turmeric, does something incredible. Not only does it lower the systemic inflammation that causes stem cells to become sluggish in the first place, but it actively promotes neurogenesis. It helps stem cells differentiate into neural cells. It literally helps repair the brain and nervous system. But just like with the tea, I found out that most people, including myself, use it completely wrong. If you just swallow a spoonful of turmeric powder or take a cheap supplement, your body filters almost all of it out through the liver before it ever reaches your bloodstream. The compound is notoriously hard for the human body to absorb. I read that it requires 2 vehicles to make the journey into your blood. It needs a compound found in black pepper, and it needs a source of fat. So I changed the way we cook. We do not just sprinkle turmeric on our food at the end. When I am making eggs in the morning or roasting vegetables, I put a small amount of olive oil in the pan. I add a generous pinch of turmeric and I grind fresh black pepper directly into it. I let it warm in the oil for just a minute before adding the food. The fat and the pepper act as an escort, allowing the curcumin to bypass the liver's immediate filtration and enter the bloodstream where it can reach the bone marrow and the brain. It is a simple, deliberate act of chemistry happening right in my kitchen skillet. The third plant that caught my attention was one I used to only associate with roasting potatoes on Thanksgiving: rosemary. I read a study that I had to go back and reread 3 times to make sure I was understanding it correctly. Rosemary contains specific compounds like carnosic acid that protect stem cells from oxidative stress. When your bone marrow finally does release stem cells, they have to travel through your bloodstream to reach the injury. In an older body, the bloodstream is often full of free radicals and oxidative damage. It is a hostile environment. Many stem cells die before they ever reach the site of the injury. I learned that the compounds in rosemary act like a microscopic shield for these cells, allowing them to survive the journey and do their job. I did not want to rely on dried, dusty flakes from a plastic bottle that had been sitting on a supermarket shelf for a year. I wanted the living plant. I went to a local nursery and bought a small potted rosemary bush. It sits on the windowsill above our kitchen sink now. Every few days I pinch off a fresh sprig. Sometimes I crush it and put it in hot water to drink. Sometimes I finely chop it and add it to our dinner. The smell of it on my fingers has become a reminder that I am not helpless in my own aging process. None of these changes happened overnight, and the results were not instantaneous. That is the hardest thing to accept when you have been conditioned by a culture of instant medical gratification. If you take a heavy painkiller, your knee stops hurting in 30 minutes. When you start trying to rebuild your body's actual healing capacity using plants, it requires patience. It requires a quiet discipline. You are not silencing an alarm. You are slowly, deliberately rebuilding the firehouse. I made a major mistake early in this process, and I want to warn you about it because it is exactly what the supplement industry wants you to do. When I first read about these herbs, my immediate instinct was to go online and buy the most concentrated, expensive pills I could find that contained isolated EGCG, isolated curcumin, and isolated rosemary extracts. I thought more was better. I thought science could extract the magic and put it in a capsule. But the more I read, the more I understood the concept of the food matrix. The human body evolved to recognize plants, not chemical isolates. When you take a massive dose of an extracted compound, the liver often treats it as a foreign toxin and works overtime to clear it out. When you consume the whole herb in its natural context, with its hundreds of supporting cofactors, the body welcomes it. I stopped buying the expensive pills. I went back to the raw, humble plants. I have been following this routine strictly for a few years now. The green tea in the morning prepared correctly, the turmeric with black pepper and fat, the fresh rosemary. I am not going to sit here and tell you that I have the body of a 30-year-old. I am 77. My lower back still gets stiff when it rains, and I still cannot run across the yard like my grandson. But I will tell you what has changed. Last month I was out in the garage fixing a wooden chair for Eleanor, and my hand slipped. I took a nasty deep gouge out of my thumb with a chisel. It was the kind of cut that a few years ago would have taken weeks to close, would have likely gotten infected, and would have left a thick, painful scar. I washed it, bandaged it, and watched it over the next few days. It did not linger, it did not stall. The edges pulled together, the tissue rebuilt itself, and within a week and a half it was healed. I sat in my study looking at my thumb, and I felt a profound, quiet gratitude. My repairmen had shown up. We spend so much time in our later years waiting for the inevitable decline. We assume that losing our ability to heal is just part of the contract we signed when we got old. We accept the pills that numb the reality of our breaking bodies. But from what I have noticed, from what I have lived, the body wants to heal. It desperately wants to repair itself. It is just waiting for us to stop masking the pain and start providing the tools it actually needs to do the work. Aging well is not about living forever. It is about maintaining the dignity of a body that can still repair its own wounds. It is about looking at the things growing out of the earth and recognizing that our biology was designed to work in partnership with them. If you are relying purely on the medicine cabinet to get you through your days, I am asking you to look a little deeper. Wake up your own capacity to heal. Boil the water, but let it cool just a bit. Crush the pepper. Smell the rosemary. Give your body the respect it deserves. I have found that when you stop treating your body like a broken machine that needs numbing and start treating it like a living ecosystem that needs tending, the results are nothing short of remarkable. Take care of yourself out there. I will see you next time.